Remember, you can get in touch with our Fearsome Foursome by emailing clubdubpodcast@mail.com and through Twitter, using the hashtag @clubdubpodcast.
Welcome to the
Club Dub Football Podcast,
where the only question is,
does your team make it into the club?
Can he get in? No, he cannot!
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Club Dub Football Podcast. I'm Rob Rose, and this week I'm going to be joined by JB, PB, and Aldrin as we talk about all the NFL news relating to free agency. We'll keep you up to date on which superstars are swapping sidelines and who we think might be a contender in 2021. So with so much news to get to, let's get on with the show.
J.J. Watt has said he was looking to move on from the Texans to join a Super Bowl contender.
The lie detector test determined that was a lie.
So hi, gents.
Hi, Rob.
Hello.
A podcast where we're going to try and force our way through all of the news that's gone on in the NFL for the last 7 days. And when we were chatting a week ago, we said it felt like the dominoes were about to start falling. And here we are a week later, starting to see the signs. So, biggest news of the week, arguably, is that Dak Prescott will remain a Dallas Cowboy for at least the next few years. A few things also coming out of Kansas City, also New Orleans. But if we start with Dak Prescott, and Aldrin, I'll throw over to you first. What were your thoughts on his bank-busting deal?
I'm not overly surprised, I guess. I think last week when we were talking about the whole Dak situation, it felt like Dallas's only real choice was to end up paying Dak whatever he kind of wanted, really. I know he was talking about being pretty close to Mahomes in terms of average salary, and obviously he's almost got his wish really with that. So it had an air of inevitability. I think almost the best thing for Dak was that he got injured and the Cowboys had a chance to see just how bad they were going to be without Dak Prescott. And obviously it kind of signals that they're confident in his health and his ability to play for the next 4 years. Otherwise, you don't give a guy that much money. But that, I guess, is the only question mark. But in terms of like the money he's on, it's kind of around the Watson mark. So that doesn't feel all that out of place for a premier quarterback that could hit the market. I think they were going to have to pay him that sort of salary. So none of it feels out of place. And I think probably both parties come away not feeling too disgruntled with it. I think everybody wins really out of that deal.
And what do you think it says about the Cowboys next season? Because I know next season is probably a very short-term view when we're talking about at least a medium-term deal. But in a year where we've talked week after week about how little cap room there'll be, and we're seeing the evidence of that with the free agency moves this week, what do you think it says about their ambition for next year? Do you think that ultimately, without a Dak, they wouldn't have achieved anything anyway? But by paying him this much, it doesn't give them much flexibility, does it, to start to fill a few other gaps and replace a few aging players?
Well, on that note, they've just restructured a couple of contracts today, so they've cleared 13 mil of cap room.
Yeah, I think amazingly, considering, how many releases I'm hearing about that basically come with significant dead money attached to them when these players walk out the door, I think it could be the off-season for restructuring, couldn't it? 2021 could be the year of the signing bonus, it feels like.
I think it was an interesting deal. Much more than I had expected that it was going to be. And this was from the guy who made sure that we talked about the Cowboys as the most important thing last week. The Cowboys were in no position other than to give Dak everything that he wanted. And then in his press conference about it, Jerry Jones made everybody believe that this was absolutely something he definitely wanted to do. Yeah, we were always going to do something like this. And kind of Jerry Jones seems to be one of the only people on the planet that can be forced into a corner and then convince you he walked in there by choice. I think the effect on the Cowboys is going to be very interesting because like Phil's made the point already of them already having to restructure contracts to make space for things. And in a way, the Cowboys are fine at some positional groups. I think that offensive line, whilst not the incredible force that it was several seasons ago, is still good. They're still strong pieces on that. They've got good weapons on offense. Obviously, like Zeke's not woken up and realized he's terrible. Zeke's going to have a bounce back season. Amari Cooper is good. They've got interesting pieces on defense. I'm not necessarily saying good or bad, but just they're in an interesting position. And overall, you kind of think, well, last season, it was Dak's injury that kind of led to the downfall of the Cowboys. Once they started to work out what they were doing, they looked like they could have been in a position to do more if they'd have had a better skilled, let's say, quarterback leading them for most of the games. So I think it makes sense for Dak. I think it makes sense for the Cowboys, and it's probably doing a lot to put them in contention next year.
I seem to remember, and I mean, I'm going off the top of my head here. When Dak went down, were they not something like 1-3 or 1-4, but incredibly averaging 30 points a game or something of that order? I think even when they beat the Falcons, didn't they? That one win up to that point in the season, it was this absolutely madcap, shootout game.
It was the onside kick, wasn't it?
Yeah, the crazy spinning onside kick that nobody wanted to dive on. And
Dak was on for like a record-setting season, wasn't he, in terms of passing yards?
Absolutely on for 5,000
It was
yards.
phenomenal.
I think it was closer to 6,000. It was like 6,100 at one point or something like that.
So I mean, I suppose that kind of absolutely cements what an important piece Dak is. And I don't know, part of me thinks, Dallas are changing DC. They'll probably have a different defensive scheme. They'll probably be able to bring in, some pretty affordable vets. I can see a kind of narrative where that does come together and the Cowboys are competitive. I can also see one, though, where, they rue the money. And God, this has been the case for the Cowboys for maybe 20 years. They start to rue the money that they've paid to these superstars. Because as you were talking, JB, I mean, they have superstars at skill positions, don't they? Whether it's Dak, whether it's Ezekiel Elliott, Gallup. I mean, so many wide receivers. They seem just absolutely spoilt for choice with wide receiver talent in that locker room. But yeah, quite what it means for next season, I don't know. It really depends how the other teams shake out, I suppose. So many unknowns elsewhere.
Say on that point though, like Dak's cap hit this year is only like 22 million, isn't it? So I mean, if you consider he was on, 35 million cap hit last year or something like that, and would have been in line for 38 if they'd tagged him. Like, those numbers don't seem out of the ordinary for this year. And I think maybe if you're the Cowboys, you bank on the cap going way back up in the next couple of years, and that Dak deal maybe balancing out with the market. So I don't think it's an obscene amount of money. I think if you want a top tier quarterback, you're paying that money. Like, I think you look at how much Kirk Cousins got paid when he hit the market. Quarterbacks, if they're going to be a starter and, have shown any value at all, they're always going to get overpaid. And I think Jerry said something along those lines that, he probably expects that he's overpaid for Dak, but he's okay with that because you have to overpay to, some of the results that you hope. So I don't know. I don't feel like they come out. I don't think either side comes out of it too unhappy.
I read something though that said it was Jerry Jones tipping his hat as to the, the upcoming TV deal. Are they negotiating a new TV deal next year? I think, and basically, knowing that that's going to be a mega bucks deal and the cap will go up massively. So, he's almost getting ahead of the market on that front.
It seems, I mean, for all of our talk about it, last week and the week before, we talked about quarterbacks. And as JB said, we talked about the Cowboys. And the funny thing is it has ended up much like we, and I guess a lot of other people out there felt, didn't it? That kind of middle of the road deal where it's long enough that, Dak has his multi-year deal. It's short enough that he gets to hit the market again, still arguably in his prime at a quarterback. So maybe it is a well-balanced deal for all parties. And I don't think Jerry Jones is going to be the last person that banks on the cap going up over the next few seasons. I think we're going to see a lot of deals structured in that way.
He's got no trade, no tag, 4-year deal. So he hits the market age 31 in an era of the cap going through the roof with that TV deal like Phil mentioned. You played it quite well for a guy coming off a significant injury and being open to the market. So I think he's played that pretty well too.
And you said, if you want a top tier quarterback, it's the money you have to pay. And who doesn't want a top tier quarterback? Given the chance, you put that kind of money in front of someone, I suppose. I mean, if we're talking about the money that the Cowboys have paid Dak, does it impact what they can maybe achieve next season? Well, what about the Chiefs? Because obviously, 12 months ago, the guy getting the absolutely massive deal was, the Super Bowl starlet Patrick Mahomes. And we saw him struggle in the Super Bowl because of injuries to Fisher and Schwartz, effectively, two key members of his offensive line. And the other big news to come out in the last 48 hours is those two members of the offensive line won't be returning next season. So are we seeing maybe the Mahomes deal start to limit the Super Bowl window for Kansas City? Or do we think with an off season and with the coaching staff they have there, the front office they have there, they'll find a way?
I think you must think that they've got a plan. Otherwise they wouldn't have cut these two guys. I think the key thing is they've both had significant injuries, in the playoffs. So was it a torn Achilles or a ruptured Achilles or whatever? That's a long-term injury, and that guy's making 14 million. So let's say he doesn't play until week 10 in a year where the cap's gone down 15 million or whatever, you're already struggling against the low cap. How, can you wait for just to have a, knowing how they got on in the Super Bowl where Mahomes was running for his life, can you wait until week 10? I think they just think they can get cheaper at the position with the same amount of kind of output and performance.
I think when you're looking at replacing a left tackle and a right tackle, part of that says to me you're prepared to pretty much blow up that offensive line. The relationships, if you make comparisons to any other sport, the back four in football or whatever, it's very much a relationship-led kind of part of the team. That familiarity that an offensive line has can be really invaluable. Do you think the Chiefs are maybe starting to look long-term and thinking about the ways that they can be competitive year after year?
I think they're going to look to the draft. I think it's a solid draft year for tackles, isn't it? So
I think Phil's point around them having to have a plan is one that probably deserves some expansion on, because it depends on what, and this applies to every team that we're talking about, it depends on what their plan is. Is their plan a simple, we have to get under the cap, who can we spare? Or is it a more complicated, we have to get under the cap and still provide a competitive team to deliver on the expectations of the fan base and the organization? Like Rob talking there about, is this a shortening of the Super Bowl window for the Chiefs? I'm pretty sure I saw this earlier. The only remaining member of the starting offensive line for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl is Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. If he comes back, if he doesn't, which obviously is still very much in the air because he took time out to care for COVID patients, as is his other job. So there's no guarantee, one, that he will come back, two, that he might not even want to come back. After a year out, he might have just decided, well, the NFL was good. This is maybe what I need to spend my time doing. And the offensive line, because as any good housewife will tell you, the first check is for the mortgage and the second is for the insurance.
Now, y'all would guess that more often than not, the highest paid player on an NFL team is a quarterback. And you'd be right. But what you probably don't know is that more often than not, the second highest paid player is, thanks to Lawrence Taylor, the left tackle. Because as every housewife knows, the first check you write is for the mortgage, but the second is for the insurance.
I think I'll just go back to, a combination of Rob and Phil's points, really. When Rob talked about that offensive line being so intrinsically built on the relationship between them, and are they breaking that up? Well, I think, yes, they probably are, but I think part of the reason may well be because of how tough that Super Bowl was. They didn't have those guys and there wasn't that connection. And I think to Phil's point, both of those guys are coming off serious injuries. I mean, being out with an Achilles and, maybe not being ready for the season is never going to be good for a tackle that's over 30 years of age. Equally, on the other side, you've got a guy coming off back surgery and there's no guarantee that he's going to come back and even be able to play because, again, being over the age of 30 and having back surgery if you're a tackle is not a good look for, the longevity of your career. So I feel like, probably part of it is cap, like Phil said, saving 14 million or whatever is a significant chunk of cash. But equally, you're saving yourself a lot of money if you don't think that those guys are going to be able to play 16 games and more next year. So maybe if you do bring in whoever you bring in to replace them, you build a solid foundation where there is a relationship, and you do expect 2 tackles to be starting for that full 16 games if you're not confident those 2 guys are going to be able to do it.
So if we take kind of Fisher and Swartz going from the Chiefs, Zeitler going from the Giants and others, I mean, JB makes the point that offensive line pieces can often be paid an awful lot of money. I mean, maybe linemen are going to be the moving pieces of this offseason. I don't know. Coming round in a pod that's going to be dominated, I suppose, by cap space and free agency moves. Moving on to the New Orleans Saints. So Janarius Jenkins, coming off the back of what I thought was an absolutely sensational season, finds himself released by the Saints. They saved themselves, between $7 and $8 million in terms of cap space, but also a similar amount in dead money. It seems an odd deal until you realize the mess the Saints are in. And when you start to realize that Janarius Jenkins is not the last person to be shown the door in New Orleans.
I think we've talked about this all week, haven't we, in terms of a couple of players that have got released from the Saints. So, Janarius Jenkins is obviously one of them, Emmanuel Sanders the other. Both veteran players that command a fairly high salary. I don't know, Sanders always felt like a cap hit. I feel like he's in the era of his career where he goes to a team for a year or two to provide a solid pair of hands at wide receiver 2 or 3. Jack Rabbit, I think you're right. I think he had a really good season. Opposite Marshawn Lattimore looked really, really solid. And I think in that team made them look even better. But again, it's those kind of players this year, anybody that's upwards of 30, that's on, that's moved from one team to another after their rookie deal, who's going to be on a sizable chunk of money that everybody feels like they could be on the block. Even if you are the star corner, like arguably Janarius Jenkins was, I think he outperformed Marshawn Lattimore last season. Arguably, I don't think Lattimore had a great year, but even if you're the top cornerback or you're the top receiver on that team, if you're on a lot of money and you're over the age of 30, I feel like teams maybe look and think, well, we can save even 5 or 6 million seems to be more than enough for them to go, okay, well, we'll cut ties and we'll find somebody else. There just seems an air of inevitability about those sorts of players, no matter how well they played, being the guys that get cut regardless.
I think Emmanuel Sanders felt better than a 2-3 to me. Again, I mean, in a good Saints team, where you can have your production and your skills amplified. But I think you're right. There's a lot of teams out there who'll look at maybe not his speed as much now, but his route running in his hands particularly, and think that he's a reasonable pickup. I don't know. The interesting thing for me is, so all these players we're talking about getting cut, and for all the reasons they're getting cut, you imagine them finding a home somewhere, don't you? I mean, I can't imagine this being the last stop for Emmanuel Sanders, certainly not for Janarius Jenkins. But the dead money with his deal particularly was a real shock to me. I mean, at the Cardinals, it looks like Patrick Peterson may be going, and if he, leaves, he's a free agent, the end of his deal has come and off he goes into the sunset with everyone's best wishes. That kind of made sense to me. Jenkins was a bit of a surprise just because it, when you're saving, like you say, $4, $5, $6, $7, $8 million, all of a sudden seems a huge amount of money. And when you've got the real superstars of the game not going anywhere, but Christian McCaffrey, restructuring his deal just to free up that kind of money for the Panthers, it does kind of show the carnage that maybe lies ahead.
The McCaffrey deal in itself kind of shows you, how bad these deals can be, because they threw so much money at him, the highest paid running back in league history. And then he missed most of the season, I think. He played, 4, 5 games, 5, 6 games, something like that, missed most of the season. The Panthers were rubbish. The cap's gone down now. They need to find a quarterback from somewhere. It's like that meme that I shared with you guys earlier. All of these quarterbacks taking big money deals. Tom Brady restructures his deal, takes a friendly deal every year to make sure that he's got pieces around him. And every other quarterback goes, well, how does Tom Brady keep winning Super Bowls? Well, he doesn't take all of that cash. Obviously he's got the longevity, he's made his money, but there's a reason that he's so successful, because he allows his teams to, the Patriots previously and the Bucks now to build a team around him. And I think with the Saints, they realized they had a window with Drew Brees, didn't they, to try and win the Super Bowl, and they kind of sold the farm to do it. and ultimately they failed, 3-4 times now in the playoffs. And I think they missed that window, and now they've got to struggle to try and get out of it. And unfortunately, they're going to have to lose some players that they probably didn't really want to lose. Morstead, I think, went the other day, which was a surprise as well. And they're going to have to move more players. We still don't know what's happening at quarterback. We assume Breeze is going to retire, but he's still not announced it, so God knows. It's something more is going to have to happen there, because they need to. They're in such financial trouble with the cap that they need to kind of make some moves to get down.
Yeah, I agree with Phil. It's kind of the part of what he's just said is kind of the point that I think I was going to go with. The Saints, recognizing they were coming to the end of their time with Drew Brees, did essentially just stack everything to give him the best opportunity to get there and to get another Super Bowl. And unfortunately, every time they got close, they kind of ran into situations like the Minneapolis Miracle. But to go back to kind of one of our other points around, is the Mahomes deal affecting things? The Mahomes deal will be affecting things in the same way that every deal that every team has put in place for their star players will be affecting them, because who saw this last season coming? Teams have backed themselves into a corner. They have set themselves up with these issues, but they haven't done it intentionally. Like, no team has gone into this thinking, oh, I need to really mess up my cap to try and win. It's kind of, they have based it on previous expectations. The cap goes up, the cap goes up, the cap goes up, because more and more money comes into the game. Everybody's suffering from that now.
So to kind of take that point then, having talked about the real big headlines from the week, if you are, let's say, the Jacksonville Jaguars or the New York Jets, I think you could probably add the Indianapolis Colts in there, but I think the Indianapolis Colts are going to be a slightly more straightforward answer to the question I've got. With the cap space those two teams have got, if we take Jets and Jags, can they be a playoff team this year? With the amount of players out there in the market, with the amount of space they have, and also the draft capital they have, do we really think this offseason is so seismic that it could truly turn the NFL on its head?
No, in my opinion. I think it's a really good point, but the reason they've got a lot of cap room and a lot of draft capital is because they're really terrible teams. There's a reason you have so many holes to fill, is because you've got to fill them. You've got a lot of cash, but you've got to find a lot of players. Now, equally, I think with two brand new head coaches in the NFL, it feels like a stretch to be a real force, particularly in the divisions that they're in. I don't know that either of them can maybe take that leap, but equally, I think they'll become a heck of a lot better teams than they have been, purely because they're in a unique position this year that they can almost go and get the best player at the position who is going to be available. Because, we've talked about it before, players aren't going to sit out the season. And if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars and you can offer even $5 million where somebody is offering $3 million, or, even a veteran minimum, then you're going to go. So I think it makes them a heck of a lot better. But I think it's a real leap to go from kind of zero to hero for both of those teams.
I think you have to keep in mind that on any given Sunday, any result is possible. The example that I think most people will go to in terms of going from being a worst franchise to a best franchise in recent memory is the Rams. Because obviously the Rams got rid of Jeff Fisher, they brought in Sean McVay, and then all of a sudden the Rams are now a perennial contender. They're always, at the very least, pushing for the playoffs. But I think that's kind of a bit of a bad faith take, because it's downplaying the talent that the Rams actually had. It wasn't that Sean McVay suddenly brought in this amazing roster of talent. Sean McVay added the pieces that were needed to the strong players that were already there. Because let's not forget, it was the Jeff Fisher administration that drafted Aaron Donald. It wasn't Sean McVay that suddenly turned Aaron Donald into an incredible player. He was always there. You have to have all of the pieces of the puzzle to be able to put it together. And you see that with the Patriots. The Patriots had lost one of the key bits of their puzzle last year when Tom Brady went to Tampa. And what happened? Tom Brady went to an organization that still had a lot of talent, with a head coach that all four of us really, really like. One of us maybe a bit more than others. And he won a Super Bowl again. The Patriots, without Tom Brady, didn't.
Sorry, I think the Patriots are going to be buyers in free agency. I think they've got some cap space, don't they? But I think they're going to go hard. They're not going to want another season like they had last season, and they're getting some big guys back. You know, I can see Van Noy's just been released by the Dolphins. I can see him going back to the Patriots. And I think they're going to make a play for some of these bigger free agents, you know, be it someone like a Juju or a Golladay or something like that.
I think the thing I would say, and I'm not necessarily, I guess I'm playing devil's advocate, I suppose. But if you look at Jacksonville and New York, it's not quite a 1 year advantage, but in a lot of ways it is. You know, I mean, we're talking about a few teams here who can put together long-term big money deals for players when pretty much every team in the league can't. You know, the Colts have got cap space. Patriots, we've just mentioned, got cap space, but the Jags and the Jets are the standouts. Now, if you're those teams, you know, on the one hand, JB says, well, you know, it's all about finding, you know, those missing pieces for the puzzle. I think this offseason shakes everyone's box. You know, everyone who thought 12 months ago they might be finding those one or two pieces, well, all of a sudden they've got major pieces walking out the door because of their cap hits. You know, if we think that the Jets are too far behind because they're currently in disarray, well, I think in the next few weeks we could find a lot of the big hitters in similar levels of disarray. If the Jets have already got a capable quarterback in Darnold, if we feel that Lawrence is as pro-ready as he is and the Jags are all in on him, why not? I mean, you know, we're talking about Janoris Jenkins, Van Noy, Emmanuel Sanders. I mean, the Jets could go and get all three of those players tomorrow and still have an abundance. They've got pretty much, Jags and Jets have got pretty much 10 picks each in the first 3 rounds of the draft as well. I don't know. I think if there was a zero to hero storyline, why not this year? This year, probably more likely than any other we've watched the league through.
I think as well, that the other thing to that is that, you know, teams like the Jags and the Jets may not have in the past couple of years been every player's ideal destination. You know, you might have an offer on the table from the Jags or an invite to, you know, go down there and visit. And maybe some players go, well, they're not a great team. You know, I'm 30. I feel like I can get a lot of money or equal money somewhere else and be on a contender. I don't think those kind of players have that luxury this year. You know, there's an awful lot of players that have been released and they're not going to want to sit out the season and not take any money. So, you know, a team like the Jags all of a sudden become a nice prospect because they can offer you some money, you know, and they can offer you a roster spot. So I think there are, you know, players like Jenkins and Sanders, you know, if Jacksonville calls up and say, well, we've got an elite quarterback coming in from the draft who's pro ready, we've got shed loads of money, do you want to come? I think that conversation is way different than it was a year or two ago. So, yeah, I mean, you're right. It could make them contenders easily. I still think it's a stretch.
I think the Jets is the really interesting one for me. I think the Jags, you've got absolutely right. The thing about the Jets is they've got various routes to it, haven't they? I mean, the Jets could go, you know what, picking at 2, we don't need a quarterback. There'll be enough teams out there looking for a real superstar in a skilled position on a rookie deal. You know, if you can fill a hole like quarterback or running back or wide receiver, or wherever it be, you know, on a rookie deal and have that really cap-friendly number against one of your superstars, you can imagine that number 2 pick being pretty highly in demand. They could end up with, in fact, I think they've already got 2 first-round picks already, haven't they, the Jets? They could end up with arguably 3 or 4. I don't know. I think there's a route for these teams, but I've probably taken us slightly off in terms of this tangent, but it all kind of feeds into the tapestry that is the 2021 offseason. I like it. So in terms of other big moves around the league, we may be on the precipice of one. So as much as this might date our recording pretty quickly, if something does go down over the next 24 hours, it would be remiss of us not to talk about all the rumors surrounding Russell Wilson and the potential that, despite us talking about the fact he'd be a great fit the Raiders and the great fit it looks like the smart money is on him being a bear. Going around our virtual room, what are your thoughts on what that could mean for either franchise?
He's kind of taken Deshaun Watson's thunder, really, isn't he? I think we thought it was going to be the off season where, you know, it'd be where's he going to end up? Where's he going to go? Deshaun Watson and Carson Wentz and all those guys. And a couple of those dominoes have obviously fallen already, but Wilson's really come from out of nowhere over the last couple of weeks. I think we've mentioned him on a couple of podcasts. But yeah, it really sounds like those rumors are catching fire now. If that's true about Vegas stopping taking money on him going to the Bears and slashing the odds on the Bears winning the Super Bowl. So it's an interesting one. Does he immediately make the Bears a better team? Yes, because they've not had a good quarterback for however many years. Are they going to be a Super Bowl team? Well, I don't know. You're going to have to give up a lot to get Russell Wilson. So I guess we'll see. But yeah, it's a big move if it does happen.
It's one of these deals or one of these rumors that for the last couple of weeks, I thought, oh, it's all nice bluster. There's a lot of posturing, I guess, from both sides. And you kind of feel like ultimately what ends up happening is, Russell Wilson gets a little bit more say on personnel decisions. Pete Carroll either retires or gives an indication that this is his last year. And Russell Wilson thinks, okay, well, I can ride it out on my mega deal anyway. And then, we'll see what comes next. But I don't know, all of a sudden, like Phil mentioned it last week and as a bit of buzz, and that seems to have just kind of snowballed each week a little bit more, and it seems to be gathering a little bit more pace. So I don't know, it's all of a sudden one that seems to be something we need to take seriously and that could legitimately happen. Now, my only thing with it is, and I've kind of said it to the group before, is that, what are the Bears trading with? They've not got a high draft pick this year, and they've not got multiple draft picks in the first round or anything like that. Like, some other teams like the Jets maybe, or the Dolphins could, arguably throw at the Seahawks. So it feels like they end up, if they do trade for him, end up giving away 3, 4 or 5 years worth of first round picks and having to be happy that they've done that. So that's the only thing for me that makes me think, oh, well, it's a bit of a stretch of a deal. But then equally, we saw with the Khalil Mack trade that, the Bears and the GM are not averse to just throwing all of their draft picks at somebody for a player that they really take a fancy to. So, it certainly doesn't seem beyond the realms of possibility.
I think for me, the point is something Phil said in that, does Russell Wilson make the Chicago Bears a better team? Because when was the last time the Bears had a good quarterback? So last season, it was split between Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles. The 2 seasons before that, so 2018 and 2019, it was Trubisky and Chase Daniel. 17 was Trubisky and Mike Glennon. 16 was Matt Barkley, Jay Cutler and Brian Hoyer. 15, Jay Cutler and Jimmy Clausen. 14, Jay Cutler and Jimmy Clausen. 13, Jay Cutler and Josh McCown. 12, Jay Cutler and Jason Campbell. 2011, Jay Cutler, Caleb Hanney and Josh McCown. 2010, Jay Cutler and Todd Collins. 2009, Jay Cutler. It was 2009, the last time the Chicago Bears had a quarterback that started all 16 regular season games. And that quarterback was Jay Cutler, who, with apologies to all of his fans out there, isn't going to set the world on fire. You want someone that will move the needle. You want someone that will move fans in a positive way towards your team. Russell Wilson, for as much as you can mock Mr. Unlimited, will do that to a fan base. It will be a move that will get people talking about the Bears, and it does make sense, because if you're gonna sacrifice your future, if you're going to sacrifice your picks, why not do it for somebody you're guaranteed will be worth it? Russell Wilson, for as much as we talk about, is he one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league, is absolutely one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league. And it's better to go with an absolute proven commodity, and he has a very shiny Super Bowl ring to prove it, than, okay, we'll see what we can get from Mitch Trubisky this year.
I think Russell Wilson, in my mind, is definitely top 5 in the league, as is Deshaun Watson. We were talking a few weeks ago about if Watson goes and if the Watson trade happens, that would be, huge. That would be generational. I mean, I think we said Breeze going from the Chargers to the Saints was probably the last time something of that magnitude happened. And Breeze was coming off the back of an injury, and a bit of an unknown commodity at the time, a bit like Manning when he went to the Broncos. To think that we have got 2 players here, Watson and Wilson, in their prime, who could both move. I think it really is what probably 30, 40 years, if ever, that you'd have to go back into the history of the NFL to see anything like it. I mean, the other thing about this, just to add a quick point on, how good is Wilson when you look at all time. I mean, I think really the generation of quarterbacks we've been treated to probably is as good, certainly statistically, as there's ever been. You look at all these players now that are overtaking the Marino records, the Favre records, the Montana records, and so on. I mean, there's an argument to say that if Russell Wilson's top 5 in the league right now, well, how much of a difference is there between that and top 5 all time? I think Rodgers, could probably be in both lists, wouldn't he? And Brady. And, if Wilson goes to the Bears, does it make the Bears competitive? Yes. Does it give Russell Wilson a better chance to win a Super Bowl than where he is currently? Surely not. I mean, I know there can sometimes be the attraction of something that's shiny and new, but you mentioned, Aldrin, about Ryan Pace. That is a GM on the hot seat and a GM who is looking to swing and hit. And it just, I don't know. You can only imagine if the Bears are ahead of everybody else to get Russell Wilson, they are offering what other people are not prepared to. And that makes me slightly worried for the future of Russell Wilson and the Chicago Bears ultimately.
I don't know if the Bears don't offer him a better kind of situation to make this or to make the Super Bowl, to win the Super Bowl, though, because he's, the Seahawks line is rubbish and he's getting hit constantly, and that's what he wants to get away from. And the Bears have got a better line. They've got an elite receiver in Allen Robinson. All right, he's got DK Metcalf and Lockett at the moment, but they've got Allen Robinson at the Bears, and could they pick up another piece if they pick up Wilson? Who knows? They seem to have a running back. Montgomery last year looked good, especially towards the end of the season. So, maybe he's not an elite starter, but, is he the best that he's had since Marshawn Lynch? It's arguably maybe. So I don't think it's clear cut that necessarily the Seahawks give him the better chance. And if he went to the Bears, the Bears were a playoff team, and ultimately I think they went as far as the Seahawks did in the playoffs this year. So, you almost say based on last season that he kind of stands pat going from one team to the other.
I think that's a really valid point, though. I don't think it really makes much of an improvement to Russell Wilson's ability to win a Super Bowl if he goes to the Bears or stays at the Seahawks. I think they're much of a muchness in terms of where their rosters feel at the minute. Also kind of where the coaching sits at, I feel like. Ultimately, I think Wilson probably is more successful in Chicago if he does move, purely because I think all of a sudden you turn around and say Russell Wilson's coming in the door, then Allen Robinson's more happy to sign a long-term deal and stick around. And certainly I think he'd be grateful to catch a pass from somebody that's actually thrown it to his hands rather than 4 feet away from him. So, but yeah, I don't know if it dramatically improves his prospects, but like Rob says, I think, I don't know, sometimes that shiny and new and a bit of a change of scenery seems like a really nice prospect, but then when you get to it, they've still got Foles there that they're paying a shed load to. How do you get rid of him?
I mean, the only thing I suppose from a Bears perspective, and weirdly I think it still applies from a Seahawks perspective, is in a year where a lot of good skill players are going to be taking low money deals, you've got to imagine the attraction of catching a ball from Russell Wilson for a running back or a wide receiver, might kind of pull them in one direction rather than the other. I mean, maybe that plays into it. I mean, the one thing I'll say, and Phil, you said this to start with, we were talking about this a week ago as could this really happen? It didn't quite feel 50-50 then to me. I think as we're recording this, it feels far more likely he goes than stays, doesn't it? I mean, even the little bits on Twitter today that the Seahawks have sent out their season ticket letters, haven't they, to their fans, encouraging people to buy. And there was not a single mention of Russell Wilson in the letter. Just little things like that all start to add up and maybe make me feel this is going to happen. But yeah, who knows? Maybe irrelevant Bears. And, I was a bit worried when you were going through those years, JB, because I think you're probably going to go back to McMahon for the last time they had a really serious superstar at quarterback. And even he played second fiddle to that defense. But yeah, maybe Russell Wilson's second win comes in the Windy City. Right off the top of my head, that you can have that one. So yeah, with all of this, happy that we've covered all the news and some of the not news on this podcast. But I do have to ask before we go, Phil, do you have a quiz of the week question?
Welcome to Phil's Quiz of the Week.
said make sure you leave a pause for Rob's stellar effort at an intro for your segment.
There have been 8 instances in NFL history where a team has pulled off back-to-back championships. Who is the only team to pull it off twice? Who's the only team who've won back-to-back championships?
The Pittsburgh Steelers.
Correct. Well done, James.
Thanks for listening. That was Phil's quiz of the week.
Oh, that felt brief.
I think if you want to drag the segment out, Phil, you should pick a team that isn't one of our teams.
Yeah,
particularly if it's old man James Bushby's team and he knows everything from...
I mean, I will have all of you know that I intentionally only went back 10 years when I was listing all of those Bears quarterbacks, but indeed was going to make the point that Rob made of the fact that it has been a really long time since the Bears had someone good.
I've got an interesting trivia one. You may not know, actually, but we'll see.
Go on.
So the home team is required to provide how many footballs for a game?
Oh, I remember this. I should know this because obviously Deflategate. And
I was going to say this all came up at Deflategate.
Yeah.
Didn't it?
I don't know. Isn't it something like 17 or something? I can't remember.
No.
Honestly, can't. It's a good question, though. The first one you've had. Well done, Phil.
Harsh.
I'm going to go 15.
No.
I think 17 feels in the right ballpark, right?
23.
Oh, you can get a 3/4 of a point for that. It's 24. 24 balls a game. My knowledge of balls isn't brilliant.
He says with a smile on his face.
Wow. So on that, is it a bombshell? I don't know. On that,
definitely something
of NFL trivia. We round out another great week of podcasting. Thank you to the three of you for keeping us company. And in 7 days' time, we'll basically be reviewing more of the same, I think. You know, who are the big deals, who's getting the big money, and just who's landing where. I think the closer we get to the draft, surely there's got to be a conclusion with Deshaun Watson sometime soon. But thank you for your company, gents. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
This is amazing. Woo!
Remember to subscribe and be cool. Tell your friends.